You're a conference chairman. Give us a little bit of insight in what that means. What is your role? And most of it is behind the scenes, and this is the most visible part, but there's an awful lot you do to prepare for this. What are some of the things that you do to help bring this conference together?
Well, a lot of work does go in ahead of time and behind the scenes. It starts when the conference calls out to speakers and says, "Hey, who wants to speak? What do you want to speak on?" And call for papers, call for speakers, and Andrew and I get the results of that, which is way more talks than we could ever fit into a conference, at least a 3 or 4 day conference, and so we have to go through and kind of call through that list and say, boy, who do we think are the best speakers? Who have the personalities that are going to kind of mesh with our audience? Because strangely, that goes into it as well. Who's interested in talking about the same things we think our audience will be interested in talking about? And so I spend a lot of time here, like right now, talking to attendees, trying to gauge what they do and don't like, what they think is coming in the future, right. Because that'll inform later in the year when we do another show. Do we add more XAML? Do we add more right. HTML, or do we focus more on cloud? Or
is that tough to balance? Because I know with me with the magazine, you always want to be writing about the new stuff, presenting what's just come out, what's coming down the road. At the same time, I certainly hear from developers, we also need help with the stuff we're using every day. We're using Visual Studio 2008. We're still building, line of business WPF apps, things like that. Do you find you have to balance the same way, the stuff they're using right now versus, looking at the shiny new toys?
Oh, totally. Yeah. And it kind of comes and goes depending on where we are in the release cycle. Sometimes you go through these periods of time where there isn't a big release or hasn't been one, and so it's calm, right? We're not in one of those times right now, so it's really is a matter of how much do we talk about WPF? Right. WPF is still incredibly widely used, but it's also unchanging or changing very little, and so it becomes hard to get speakers that want to talk about it because to them it's all old hat. And at some point it becomes hard to get people in to sit and listen because they'll look at the talk, they'll tell you ahead of time, boy, we really want more WPF content. And then when it comes down to it, they'll go to a different room because there's something shiny.
Right.
And yet, obviously, you're right, there's this balance. And so we try to have at least 50 to 60% of our content be shipping products that are directly relevant. And then the remainder, and it varies that exact percentage, but something less than half ends up being kind of future looking.
Okay. Now, developers have choices of a lot of conferences out there. As a chair, what do you want to tell developers as to what distinguishes Visual Studio Live from Build, from other shows, from other developer conferences held by other companies?
Well, there are different kinds of conference. I think there's, like you mentioned, Build or other Microsoft events that are clearly put on by Microsoft primarily to promote their vision of the future and their vision of their products. And absolutely, there's some great content. I'm not disparaging that at all, and I go to some of those myself to learn. But at the same time, what you're getting is Microsoft's version of reality. And then there are independent conferences like VS Live and Modern Apps Live where most of the speakers are third-party non-Microsoft people. Right? We're either trainers, we're consultants, we work in companies and come here to speak, and so we're sharing experiences from the trenches, so to speak, right? And so, yeah, it's true, we're not the people that are making the product, but we're the people that are using it in ways that the Microsoft guys probably have never envisioned. And in that regard, we're a lot more like the attendee, right?
And maybe you're a little more objective in some of your evaluations of the technology too.
I think that's
not being...
we're not bound to Microsoft's marketing messages or choices. Sometimes they're synergistic, but sometimes they're not. So there certainly have been examples over the years where Microsoft comes out with a technology that ActiveX documents in VB5, where it's like, really? And of course the guys that wrote it were very excited, but the rest of us are sitting out here wondering, who would actually use this thing, right? And of course there are other times where there's a technology that'll come out, some of the new web tools in Visual Studio 2012 that are just phenomenal. It's hard to see why you wouldn't get behind them, because it's so obvious that it makes people's lives better, and so then we're very much in synergy. So I do think it's kind of an unvarnished or a more objective view of the technology.
Okay. And one of the things you mentioned at the introduction to the keynote this morning was the ability to mix and mingle and talk to the speakers. Now, I've been to enough Microsoft shows myself to know that it's not quite the same feeling in terms of the speakers being available. Is that important to VS Live?
I believe it's critical. And like I mentioned, when Andrew and I pick the speakers and are picking the sessions, one of the things that goes into our decision making is we know most of the people that submit, either by reputation or in person, and we'll pick people that we think are going to interact well and are going to be open to having conversations in the hallway or after their session. And I think that's a critical aspect of this show. And we're not a 10 or 15,000 person show, and I'm sure maybe the people that run the show would love to be big, but the reality is that you've got a few hundred or just over 1,000 people, something like that, at a show. It gives you, the attendee, a great opportunity to have maybe a 15 or 20 minute conversation over a coffee with somebody, and they might give you great insights that would be were you to pay them for consulting fees, might be unaffordable. But here it's just a casual, interesting conversation. So I think it's great stuff.